Hello everybody, JarotDaCarot here, and in this video I will be reacting to two M&J TV videos on why he thinks BDSP is the worst Pokemon game ever made. I agree with him on the topic, and I plan on making a tier list eventually, but I wanted to hear his arguments to kind of see if they line up with mine. The two videos combined add up to roughly about 50 minutes, and I like to add a lot of commentary, so to make sure this video doesn't go over like an hour and a half or so, I think I am gonna just like highlight some of my responses to him. So you won't get his full clips here. You won't get his whole 50 minutes of him talking and then like 50 minutes of me talking. I think you're gonna get a little bit of a cut around. If you want to see his full videos, both are gonna be linked in the description below. But other than that, we are gonna start talking about why him and I hate BDSP. So let's go.
Greetings, Poké fans! Michael here, and Pokemon Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl did a lot of things right. The addition of hideaways makes the underground far more enjoyable and fun. I found most battle arenas to be absolutely beautiful. Adding
the game really did have a gorgeous art style in a way, minus like the walking Pokemon around, but they just stuck with they never committed to a theme, really. I enjoyed the game on the first playthrough. It's almost weird. You play through it once and you almost don't realize how bad the game is until you look back at it. It's kind of an odd game because
character customization, even though the originals did not have it, something Oris failed to do, was a great call. And your Pokemon don't need to know 8 gems anymore, which thank God for. But despite those good things, these games have quite a few problems that I'm going to be covering in this video. Now, to be clear, I'm not someone who loves to hate on Pokemon. I love Pokemon, and I've enjoyed every main series game that's come out since I started playing almost 20 years ago, including these ones.
The only ones that I would rank as low as I rank BDSP is Sun and Moon. To me, those games are just movies. They're movies that you are just begging to be able to play the game at some point. I can't do 11-minute cutscenes in Pokemon. I'm too old school. I'm Gen 2, Gen 1, Gen 3 era, where Gen 3, the longest cutscene is Rayquaza coming from the sky. I think that lasts like 3 minutes at most.
These criticisms don't come from a place of hatred. They come from a place of love for the franchise and a desire for it to be better. So with that out of the way, let's get started with the first problem I have with these games, which is kind of a big umbrella problem full of multiple smaller problems. That being not including enough from Platinum. Of all the enhanced versions to come out over the years, Platinum is the biggest improvement over the versions it's enhancing. The main reason for that is the expansion it provided to the Sinnoh Dex. It and Ultra Sun and Moon are the only ones to expand their regional Pokedex. Black 2 and White 2 did also, but I don't really count them as enhanced versions. They're more sequels since it's a totally new story and different progression and all that jazz. And Platinum provided a much more impactful regional Dex improvement over the originals than Ultra Sun and Moon did. That's because the Sun and Moon
Because remember, in Diamond and Pearl, there was only one Fire-type family outside of the starter. So if you wanted a Fire-type Pokemon, you either had the Chimchar family or the Ponyta family. You had no other option, until after the Elite Four at least.
And a Alola Dex is perfectly adequate, having over 300 Pokemon, while the Diamond and Pearl Sinnoh Dex is horrible. It only has about 150 Pokemon, is chock full of weak and bad bug types, and it underrepresents several important types, like Fire, Electric, and Dragon. If you're playing a Gen 4 Sinnoh game today, there is no reason to play Diamond and Pearl over Platinum, because Platinum just gives you so many more options. When Brilliant
And remember, the Fire and Electric, he points that out, that the Fire and Electric types are lacking. The last gym leader is an Electric type, and one of the Elite Four members is a Fire type. So not only do they exclude those types like heavily in the game, then they make two of the probably top 5 final bosses run those types. It made no sense. Gen 3 did this with having a Ghost and an Ice type Elite Four member, while only having 2 of each of those types in their family tree, or like their Ho and Dex, like those families in the generation. So that's kind of common at this time, like Gen 2 and Gen 4, or sorry, Gen 3 and Gen 4, but they
Diamond
needed
and Shining
to fix
Pearl
it.
were announced, I talked about how the games must include the Platinum Sinnoh Dex, because not doing so would be a completely illogical regression. The trailers showed several Platinum Dex Pokemon in them though, so this concern of mine was pretty quickly mitigated. But then Brilliant Diamond Shining Pearl came out, and instead of doing the best case scenario Platinum Dex, or the worst case scenario Diamond and Pearl decks, they did a weird mix of both. The Sinnoh Dex is the Diamond and Pearl one, so the wild Pokemon on the surface and the trainer's Pokemon are all original Sinnoh Dex Pokemon. However, to appease those of us who wanted the Platinum Dex, they made Platinum Dex Pokemon available in the hideaways in the Grand Underground. And frankly, that's fine with me. I never really cared about what the Pokedex itself had. I cared about what Pokemon I could use on my team. I think it would be better if the enemy trainers had more variety, but my team is the most important one. But then I come to find out that
That's true, but when it comes to the actual, like, leaders, I do kind of disagree. Like, the Electric Gym needed to have Electivire. Like, it's the whole point of the generation. It's the best electric type in the generation, like look-wise, and it has a big boss feel to it. But, I get what he means by that.
Underground doesn't have all of the Platinum Dex Pokemon. Sure, it doesn't make sense for Giratina to be down there, but there's a lot of Platinum Dex Pokemon that are just completely unobtainable before the league. Nosepass and Probopass, all of the evolutions, Tangela and Tangrowth, Yanma and Yanmega, Tropius and the Porygon line are all completely unavailable before getting the National Pokedex. Yes, there were some Pokemon added like Pinsir, Jinx, and Ursaring, plus the Kanto and Hoenn fossils. Although, side note, it seems like the Kanto and Hoenn fossils might be bugs. I found a root fossil after having 8 gym badges in my Brilliant Diamond, and some other people have as well, but only in Brilliant Diamond. If you're in Shining Pearl and you found a Kanto or Hoenn fossil after having 8 gym badges, but before the league, then let me know in the comments, because I think it might just be a bug for Brilliant Diamond, which would be really weird. But those new Pokemon
That's weird. I wonder if that was the case.
Loss of the other ones. Especially the other ones include several Gen 4 Pokemon like Probopass. But what makes me fuming...
Also remember, Probopass was, like, available, I think, before the second gym in Platinum. So the Probopass is a good example of, like, a new Pokemon that you were able to get so early on in the game. So even if you don't like it as a Pokemon, it was something available that now is no longer available.
Mad is that there are multiple Platinum Dex Pokemon that you can catch before the league, but you can't fully evolve until after the league. Are you kidding me? You can get Gligar, Rhydon, and Dusclops all before the league, but you can't get Gliscor, Rhyperior, and Dusknoir until after the league because their evolution items are locked to the post-game. They made Pokemon available before the league that you can't fully evolve until after the league. They consistently do this in remakes, and it frustrates me to no end. But for the other remakes, those new evolutions were never available in those remakes' original games. So Crobat was never available in Red, Blue, and Yellow, so they didn't put it in Fire Red and Leaf Green.
Which made sense, but what they did with Fire Red and Leaf Green is once your happiness was to a certain level, it would just stop the evolution. So it would say like, oh, your Pokemon's evolving, but something weird stopped there, something like that. I think Heart Gold and Soul Silver, you could actually evolve like Yanma before you even had the proper Pokedex for it. Actually, I know you can, because I know I've used my Mamoswine in the Elite Four in those games. I think that's how you should do it. Make it where the original game, like Golbat couldn't evolve, but now you get Crobat, but then in the generation, everyone's kind of like, I don't know what that is. That's how I would personally have done it, but like he said, the Gen 3 kind of gets the pass because it was the first generation to kind of introduce, like, be an old gen, but introduce new gen Pokemon as well. By Gen 4, they should already kind of have a format down what they're going to do, and Heart Gold and Soul Silver changed the format and made it better. So now it's like, okay, why would you go back? Why would you give me a Pokemon that's available but not make its evolution available when now you kind of set the standard that we all know that it evolves already? So you're not really like hiding it, you know what I mean? You're not getting a Togetic in Pokemon Heart Gold and Soul Silver and going, and raising it going, well, I didn't know Togekiss existed. Like, you're only running that thing if you know it evolves again. That was a bad example because I don't think the stones are actually available. So Heart Gold and Soul Silver still had that issue a little bit because I think they had like, if you could evolve with like a move, so like Ancient Power on Yanma or Piloswine, I think they allowed it, but they didn't allow it for evolution stones, so that made it kind of 50-50. So Heart Gold Soul Silver might not be the best example, but you know what I mean.
But Sinnoh had these evolutions before. It had them in its regional Pokedex in Platinum. They have predetermined places to put those evolution items. They could have so easily done it, and they just didn't. They made other new evolutions available, like Electivire, Mamoswine, and Frostlass, but they just cut out Gliscor, Rhyperior, and Dusknoir, plus the other ones whose base forms you can't even get at all. Just why? Why not just include all of them? Additionally, Rotom got screwed. Platinum made it so you could get Rotom as soon as you gain access to the old chateau. You don't need the national Pokédex, but you need it in Diamond and Pearl and in Brilliant Diamond Shining Pearl. I guess the reasoning is that the non-Synodex Pokemon are only found in the underground, and they don't want to put Rotom in the underground. But why not just expand the dex then? I know it's more Pokemon to see to get the national dex, but it's like, it's not that hard to see them all. In the end, these are all the Pokemon that were added to and thus improved the Synodex in Platinum version. Then these are all of the non-Synodex Pokemon you can...
That's crazy. That is just so crazy. Like, I get that the bottom row is very much taken apart because of the Rotoms. Like, obviously, that's 6 Pokemon that count for one. But I don't know what... Again, you're trying to appeal to people's new experience. I'm going into BDSP because I liked Platinum. And I think not only giving us Rotom, but giving us his other forms without an event would have been really good for BDSP because that's a new experience for a player. I never got to go through Platinum with a Rotom wash because I didn't do the event. But now you give me access to the equipment, whatnot. Now I might be able to have a new experience with a remade game. Like, that's what you want. Fire Red and Leaf Green gave you a different experience than Red and Blue. Heart Gold, Soul Silver, completely different experience than Gold and Silver. Even Oras gave you a completely different experience than the Ruby and Sapphire. I mean, Platinum gave you a different experience than Diamond and Pearl, and that was just an enhanced version. That wasn't even a remake. Now, this, they want to give you a different taste of the game. Like, they try, but they do it in the most lazy way possible. It just doesn't make sense. It's a design flaw that should have been discussed at every board meeting. Well, what Pokemon are we excluding? Like, and why are we excluding them? Like, what's the point? Why would you ever provide that much less than the Platinum, the enhanced version of the game you're already remaking?
Can get in BDSP before the league. While most of them are still there, it's a significant cut. The most egregious being the removals of the evolutions of Pokemon whose base form you can get with ease. Haha! It is I, Grunty Boy! What is it?
This guy has literally the best advertisements in any Pokemon video.
Actually, oh, I also have very fond memories of new customers getting 20% off orders of $20 or more by heading to the link in the description below and using code DSC MandJTV. Oh, what a lovely year.
I'm pretty sure that code doesn't work anymore.
Again. I use their shampoo and conditioner too, and it is fantastic. Ta-ta! The Pokédex change is the worst of them, but there are other Platinum improvements that were removed. One big one is the Battle Frontier, which I'm disappointed by, but not surprised. They didn't put the Battle Frontier from Emerald in Omega Ruby Alpha Sapphire. Why should we expect it now?
I don't know why they're just done with Battle Frontiers. To me, it's just a takeaway from the single player experience. It's something that, as a kid, I didn't really care about. Now, as an adult playing through the game, I actually really wish I experienced Battle Frontiers when they were like new and you got to learn. It was essentially a way of making a good competitive team while not needing to go and competitively battle people. It was a single player reason to make competitive Pokemon.
I'm not expecting a Battle Frontier ever again, to be honest.
Me neither.
Which is so annoying. Additionally, the Shard move tutors from Platinum were removed, which was a great addition because it expanded Pokemon's movesets and gave you more uses of shards to dig up in the underground. Shards can be dug up in the underground in BDSP, but they're mostly useless. You only use them to get the weather TMs, which I don't think people are going to be using very often. If you're using a weather team, just use a Pokemon with a weather setting ability. And you can exchange them for TMs or spheres with the hikers in the underground. But that's not good enough for me. Omega Ruby Alpha Sapphire had those move tutors. They were in the post game, but they still existed. But in Brilliant Diamond Shining Pearl, they're just not there at all, which I don't understand. That's like severely limiting so many Pokemon's movesets when they could have easily been included. Before I move on to the next problem, you should subscribe to this channel, that'd be great. But also, my M&J TV hat and plushie at my merch store, MandJTVmerch.com, are going away forever at the end of this year, or when they sell out, whichever happens first. The Team Sky shirt is back as well, and all these items have a discount, so pick one up soon before they sell out or the end of the year, and if you order soon enough, it can arrive before Christmas, MandJTVmerch.com. So the game...
If I ever make it big on YouTube, one thing I really want to do is I want to be the guy who wears like other people's merch a lot on streams and on the videos and whatnot. I've always said that if I made this into like a good enough career where I could afford to do that, I would try to at least like once a week, like, hey, I'm buying this from this creator, and just kind of like advertise like who I watch out. I believe the only merch I've ever actually bought was the Armor Skeptics. I know for a while I had some of his shirts. One was the did not get hugs as a child or something. And Rooster Teeth. I got some Achievement Hunter shirts.
Games failed to include really important platinum improvements, but they have other issues as well. Following Pokemon in these games is horrible. I tried it briefly once and then never did it again. The last time following Pokemon was good was in Let's Go. Most every Pokemon travels at the same speed as you, or in some cases will move in front of you and change their path as you do, which I think is pretty cool. Some Pokemon's following is riding instead, which I think adds to the immersion. In Let's Go, I could ride around the world on the back of my Arcanine, something I've always wanted to be able to do, and that was really awesome. But Sword and Shield messed up following Pokemon really badly. Most Pokemon are too slow to keep up with you when walking, so they fall behind, so they sprint to catch up, then walk again, fall behind, sprint, and so forth. And that assumes the Pokemon is fast enough to keep up with you at all. It was a major downgrade from the following in Let's Go, and unfortunately, BDSP took a lot more from Sword and Shield than they did from Let's Go.
Which is super weird. Like, even like Heart Gold, Soul Silver, the way they had Pokemon follow you was perfectly fine. So they did really good with Heart Gold, Soul Silver, really good with Let's Go, messed up on Sword and Shield, and then tried to copy Sword and Shield's method, and actually, in my opinion, did worse in this game. Because in Sword and Shield, at least the Pokemon looked good. It was like their actual models. But like, look at this Onix here on the screen right now. Like, that's not an Onix. It looks like a plushie of an Onix. And then if that's going to be your play style, or if that's going to be your art style, I should say, just make it look like a plushie. Do like art like Heart Gold and Soul Silver did. Heart Gold, Soul Silver, not all of their models were to size, obviously, but you could tell what every Pokemon was supposed to be. And the movement, oh my god, I think it's Ekans in this game. Ekans moves like not like a snake at all. It's like you made it in Let's Go. In the Let's Go games, just copy at least the walking animation.
There are a variety of reasons it's bad in these new games. The first is that the Pokemon's speed rarely matches the player. Slow Pokemon cannot keep up with you and end up left in the dust, resulting in an endless loop of going back into their Pokeballs, reappearing at a place far behind where you were at that moment, and then never catching up unless you stop. Even fast Pokemon like Weavile move slower than the player when they're running, the default speed for the player to move.
That's crazy.
An easy way to fix this is to just have the Pokemon move the same speed as the player. That's what they did in Let's Go, and it works. I know it's not realistic for certain Pokemon, but with this feature, I'm not worried about realism. I just want my Pokemon to walk next to me. The next problem is that the Pokemon are solid objects. You can run into them and they will slow you down. This is a huge annoyance, especially when you're going one way, then want to turn around and go the other way. In Let's Go, if your Pokemon gets too close to you or an object, it instantly returns to its Pokeball and respawns behind you. Heart Gold and Soul Silver had you simply phase through the Pokemon. Why couldn't BDSP do one of those things? Why does having your Pokemon follow you mean that you have to have an obstacle? The final thing I don't like about following Pokemon in BDSP is the aesthetics of it. Even if you fixed the problem of the movement speed and the solid objects, it still doesn't look good. The Pokemon are not to scale, resulting in large Pokemon looking wholly absurd while tiny next to the player. There were two ways to fix this, and they chose neither. The first is to make the Pokemon to scale. Let's Go did this, and it was great. even the really big Pokemon. It makes it so they can follow you in far fewer places, but it still looks good. Heck, they don't even have to be exactly to scale. Just do what Heart Gold Soul Silver did and make them somewhat bigger than the player. Having a Dialga with normal proportions barely taller than the player looks ridiculous. The other option was to just chibi-fy the Pokemon. All the overworld people are chibi-fied, so why not do the Pokemon too? Heart Gold Soul Silver kind of did this, and it looks great. I do understand though that this would be a big chore, since they would have to create totally new 3D models. Although maybe they could have taken the models from Rumble, who knows?
But even then, it's like, okay, you're remaking a game already. So you don't have to put time into the environment. You don't have to put time into the storyline. You don't have to put time into any of that. So where you're saving time, you can put that time into art. If the art style was going to be a hindrance to the point that you can't do certain game mechanics, you need a different art style then. Because you already changed the art style from the originals. So you change the art style, you can't then use that as an excuse later on for, well, we couldn't upgrade the models because we wanted this art style. Like, okay, like, that's on you. You shouldn't have made it that way.
Then just make them more to scale. It doesn't have to be exact. Just bigger than the player if the Pokemon is bigger than the player. I understand that they were trying to include a highly requested feature, but we were requesting the Heart Gold Soul Silver or Let's Go version, not this garbage. If following Pokemon is going to continue to be this bad, then they just shouldn't include it anymore. The next problem I have is how they changed secret bases. This one is more of a mixed bag for me.
Yeah,
I do like hunting for statues, since it gives another fun thing to dig for in the underground. I also enjoy changing which ones you display to try to get certain Pokemon to show up. By using grass statues, I was able to get all the grass starters relatively quickly. But the addition of statues has come at the expense of something that I and a lot of other people really cared about: being able to decorate your secret bases. Yes, you can decorate them with statues, but only statues. In the original games, you could decorate it with a TV, dolls, desks, tables, kitchen furniture, and more. I enjoyed that as a kid and was hoping to do it again, but you can't. The only things you can place in your secret base are the statues, which makes the base feel less like a home and more like you've unearthed an army of terracotta soldiers. I don't understand why they removed this. Horus let us decorate our secret bases as freely as the original Hoenn games did, so why take that from us in Sinnoh? I like the statue decorating, but I didn't want it to replace the other decorating. I feel like they could have given us a separate statue room, or even just let us put both statues or decorations into our secret bases. So people that only care about the spawn boosting effects could do that, and people who want to decorate their base can do that, or a mix of the two.
Yeah, giving it just like a trophy room, like a back room specifically for the trophies, I don't think it would be that hard. Just, yeah, it's one of those things like, this should have been talked about at the first meeting. Well, why are we just giving them basically a hole in the wall to throw different statues in? Like, okay, like, because at that point you could make an item in the item bag. It's really just an inconvenient spot you have to go to switch the statues out. And then everyone's just collecting statues, so it's not like you have anything to show off. You're not decorating, like he said. There's no, well, I want to show someone in my room, but not like, you got people like my girlfriend who play like Sims all day. She would love build a room feature in Pokemon. Like, it'd be something very easy for her to just engross herself for a few hours doing. So it seems pointless for the average Pokemon player, but for someone else who enjoys that mechanic, there's no reason to not include the mechanic.
It just sucks that we can't decorate our bases anymore, aside from, well, like a statue garden. Another thing I'm bummed they removed about the underground is capture the flag and the traps. I didn't really get to experience those as much since I didn't have people I could play those games with locally, really. So I'm not as bummed about it, but I was looking forward to trying it, and now I don't get to try it. The next problem I have is that the games are riddled with bugs. I think these might be the buggiest games to come out in a decade. Some glitches are fine with me, like using an exploit to clone Pokemon, but then some of them break the game, like this person getting trapped behind NPCs. And since they couldn't find a teleport Pokemon in the underground, had to restart their entire save game. I saw in Serbia that apparently there's like a backup save to your most recent save that you can use to get out of a trap like that, but it's like, why should that even be necessary? Just don't trap players with a bug. It's not a great look to have a AAA title game on release have so many bugs, some of which can force people to have to restart the game. It's like, not great. And the final problem I have with BDSP is probably my most controversial one. In fact, I know it's my most controversial one because I've seen a bunch of comments on my Plays channel talking about how much they like this thing. So, I'm just gonna come out and say it. I think the Pokemon League is too hard. Hear me?
Nope. I know what he's gonna say here. I disagree. I don't think the Pokemon League is too hard. I think the rest of the game is too easy. I think what Pokemon needs to start to do is, first gym, you learn about type coverage. Second gym, you learn about like stats. You learn like this gym specializes in like very fast Pokemon or very offense heavy Pokemon. And then you can focus more on like a good type, like the third gym being like a steel type or something like that, like a harder type against the starters. Like you go on from there so that as you go through the gym battles, you're learning stuff. And then by the time you get to like the last gym battle, you have an opponent, the gym leader would have like a good team, all still one type, but like a good team with that type, with some weaker items, citrus berries, stuff like that, and some good stat increasements, not full-on competitive style teams. But then once you get to the Elite Four, they can have a more competitive style team. And I think that would work. The issue with BDSP is you go from nothing battle, nothing battle, nothing battle, nothing battle, nothing battle, not a single hard battle in the entire game. And then you get to the league and it's a beast. Like, if you're not a hardcore Pokemon player, that league is hard to beat. I did decent in it. It gave me a fun experience because it's something I'm not used to. I'm not used to actually going, okay, my 6 Pokemon can kind of do this off each other. Their Pokemon are these, so I have to work around it. I think I ended up actually beating their Garchomp with my Torterra. So with my starter, I beat the champion's lead Pokemon. That's awesome. Like, that's a good experience. But I understand if you're not a hardcore Pokemon fan, that level jump, I bet you there's a huge portion of the player base that got to the league, never beat it, and never played the game again.
Me out. For many years, people, mainly adult Pokemon fans, have complained that
True.
the games have been too easy. And I don't usually agree with them. Yeah, a lot of the times, I'm not really having any problems through.
Well, again, not too easy. Not I just said the game is too easy, so now I'm going to kind of argue against myself there. Not just too easy, too handholdy. You have way too often, you'll be playing the new Pokemon game, and it's like, here's how you catch a Pokemon, and it's like a 5 to 10 minute cutscene. And then, oh, you have to come here. And then you walk like 4 feet, and it's another cutscene. And Legends Arceus, even though it's probably my favorite Pokemon game ever made, had this issue. Where so often it's like, just let me get to the world. Let me get to the world. Let me go explore. Pokemon Red and the Gen 1 games I'm going through right now, there is no hand-holding. They literally give you a Pokemon, they go. You have no direction on where to go, whatnot. And it makes exploration the main concern of, okay, it's a linear path, but it's only linear if you already kind of know where you're going. Like, I bet you that those original games, so many people probably stayed in the first forest for so long. I know as a kid, simple caves would take me forever to get through. But now it's like, if you were stuck in a cave for 5 minutes, I feel like the Pokemon game would just have a character come in there and go, I'll guide you through the cave. Like, it's too hand-holdy. That doesn't make it too easy. Like, the battles themselves, the over-leveling one, not is an issue, but I mean, that's also playstyle. But I don't think the new games are too easy. They're too, let me do what I want to do. Let me at least skip dialogue in a way. Or let me just set a mode. Even if they had like an easy and hard mode, and the only difference was the easy mode held your hand, and the hard mode was like, yeah, here you Pokemon, go. You know what you're doing. Go get 8 badges. Go.
A regular playthrough of the game, but I personally am not looking for a very difficult Pokemon game. Besides, you can make the game harder on yourself, and even if you don't, there are certain battles that will get people up against the ropes, like Ultra Necrozma. But I do understand the concern, so I don't have a problem with them making the Pokemon League a bit more difficult than it has been in the past. In a way that's not just boosting levels, because boosting levels just means more grinding beforehand. I'm talking like better strategies, better held items, stuff like that. But the League...
Like, the perfect example is, if you have a Psychic type Elite Four member, it should almost always have, like, a Trick Room variant. Or even, like, normal type, because I know you could do it with, like, Porygon 2 and Snorlax. Like, there's a bunch of normal types that can work off of Trick Room 2. Something as simple as that would teach the, like, trainer, like, oh my god, like, this is a strategy. There's something that you can do with this. Or a weather team, even. Have the first Pokemon on the fire team be a Torkoal, and then have the rest of his team play off of the sun. Like,
in Brilliant Diamond, Shining Pearl went too
but
far.
have a scale.
In the original Sinnoh games, the Elite Four and Champion had 30 IVs across the board, just shy of perfect, random natures, and no EVs. And the only Pokemon to get held items are the Aces, which have citrus berries. But then the Elite Four in BDSP have perfect IVs in every stat, except the attack stat they don't use, a useful held item on every Pokemon, a beneficial nature, and 300 EVs distributed out, usually maxing one stat and spreading the extra to the others. Cynthia's Pokemon are the same, but her Pokemon have the maximum 510 EVs. In short, Cynthia has perfect competitive Pokemon, and the Elite Four come pretty close. And there are a lot of nasty sets, like Drifblim with Minimize, Strength Sap, and Baton Pass, a set that would be banned in Smogon competitive battling. And on top of all of that, they're perfect competitive Pokemon that can use full restores. This is insane!
Pokemon also needs, if they did ever have like a hard mode, that's something that they need to do. They need to have it where you're not allowed to use items in battles, but neither can your opponent. It just ruins the vibe of battles to me completely. Like, I really don't mind if people use like held items, whatnot, but if I ever play like an old game, one of my rules is I do not heal during gym battles or Elite Four members. Against random trainers, I don't really care. I mean, in the Gen 2 games, nothing is worse than getting out of the cave and having that hiker Anthony there, and you're like starting with a Cyndaquil. It's the only thing you have that's left after the cave, and then the Geodude and Machop beats you. It's like, okay, at that point, it's like, now you have to go all the way through the cave again. I'm okay using a potion against like a trainer, but gym battles and Elite Four battles should feel somewhat regulated. It should feel important in the universe of Pokemon. So
I think it's cool that they put a perfect competitive team in the game outside of a battle facility. But I don't think it's cool that they did it before the post game. If they wanted to make the League rematches perfectly competitive after you've had time to build your own competitive team, I think that would be great. It gives you something to work toward. But for the first run through of the League that you must defeat to carry on in the game, that doesn't sit well with me. The player doesn't have all the resources to make a competitive team.
That's true.
The Destiny Knot, the Judge feature, and the power items are all locked to the post game. Yes, you could still theoretically make perfect competitive Pokemon before the League, but it would be incredibly difficult to do so, especially since you can't even see what IVs they have. But even if it was possible, it flies in the face of what Pokemon has stood for so long. Beating the game with Pokemon you've grown attached to. That Starly you caught on the first route will be nowhere near competitively perfect. It has a random nature, will have random EVs, and it has random IVs you can't even see. In previous games, that was enough. But now, assuming you don't over-level past the level of Cynthia's Garchomp, your Staraptor is really gonna struggle because it doesn't have the same competitive advantage that Cynthia and the Elite Four's Pokemon do. This actually means that I kind of like affection benefits in battle now. At least in this specific scenario. In the past, I'd get frustrated when I get them because they were giving me an unfair advantage. But now they serve simply to get you on the same level as the competitively perfect League Pokemon. However, it's all luck-based, nothing to do with strategy, so that takes away from it. And what makes the League's difficulty even worse is that it comes out of nowhere. Prior to the League, the game is trivially easy. There was one gym leader that knocked out more than one of my Pokemon, and I was playing on set style with no healing items. It was a simple game if you knew your type matchups. But then out of nowhere, the difficulty is like this and then shoots up like this. The curve doesn't make any sense. I know that a lot of you like that the League is way harder now. And while you may enjoy this challenge, I want you to think about the kids playing this game for the first time. Or yourself when you were a kid. For me, if I was a kid trying to beat this league with no knowledge whatsoever of EVs or IVs and didn't pay any attention to natures, I would get incredibly frustrated as I tried over and over and over again to beat it, and then eventually gotten so frustrated that I quit, or I would have overleveled my team way past level 66 just so I could move on.
See, and that's kind of what I was saying too. Like, as a kid, what do you normally do? You save before the next Elite Form battle. That way you have a easy reset, and because you assume, like, well, if I lose, I don't want to go through the other battles again. Like, I think a lot of people have that mindset. So here, you end up at Cynthia after probably getting lucky on everyone else, and then you have to get really lucky against Cynthia if your team's not ready to go. I'm a very high-level Pokemon player, in my opinion, like, compared to the average person playing the game. And Cynthia was a tough match for me, especially if you're unprepared. I went in knowing that the Elite Four was hard. I can't imagine a kid who's just playing casually.
And that grinding would have sucked, because grinding is my least favorite part of Pokemon. It's something that I'm glad the modern experience share has effectively removed. Like I said, I don't mind that they made it some amount of tougher, but they went too far.
Gen 2 might be the best example of that, where you get to the end of Victory Road. I feel like every time I play Gen 2, the last like hour of the game is me going back to Victory Road and keep grinding until my Pokemon are up to level for the Elite Four.
There was some kind of difficulty option that determined whether the league was competitive Pokemon like it is, or more like the original games where they're not competitive, then I'd be perfectly fine with it. But that doesn't exist. So you're forced to fight perfect competitive Pokemon without your own competitive Pokemon. And while a lot of older players are gonna like that challenge, I think it's too unfriendly to beginners. In the end, Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl are very fun games that
And also, mind you, when you're making a remake, you're trying to bring people back into Pokemon. You're not making these for the people who are gonna buy every game already. Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl was to get the people who were playing in the DS era into the Switch era. So you have to give them a good experience so that they would move on to the Legends Arceus, so that they would move on to Violet and Scarlet, Scarlet and Violet, sorry. Like, that's the point of these remakes. It makes no point, or makes no sense to make a remake give you the player who came back a bad experience. Because all these people who came back from Diamond and Pearl are playing a game now that they probably didn't even get through. Why would they buy the next game? Especially if you get caught in the Elite Four. I mean, I have a lot of friends who say that, but, well, I haven't beat that game yet. Okay, well, if you haven't beat that game, why are you going to buy the next one? You literally still, in your mind, you go, well, if I want to play Pokemon, I should go back and finish that last game, but you don't want to go back because you know that you're up against an opponent that you haven't even came close to beating yet.
I enjoyed playing through, and I will continue to enjoy in my free time until Legends Arceus comes out. However, they're disappointing Pokemon games because there were a lot of things that they could have done better that they just didn't. Thanks so much for watching with an extra special...
I haven't touched the game since Arceus came out. Ironically, like, watching videos like this, I do want to go back and do another single player playthrough, but the competitive, it didn't matter to me. And really, like he said, I'd rather go back and play Platinum, if anything. But we do have one more video of this. So this video should be basically the same topic. We'll probably talk about the same things, but 2.5 years later. So let's see if his opinion changed at all. All right, so this is the worst Pokemon games and why.
Someone who is highly critical of Pokemon games. I've heard plenty of criticisms of X and Y being too easy, Oris lacking a battle frontier, Sun and Moon having too many unskippable cutscenes, Sword and Shield's bland wild area, and Scarlet and Violet's glitches. I acknowledge those flaws with those games, but generally, I like the games
I want to make sure
as a
he was
whole,
talking
and I still enjoy
primarily
going
about
back
this
to
game.
play them. So it should carry a lot of weight when I say that 3 years ago, Pokemon released the worst mainline games
BDSP,
ever.
yep.
Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl. I consider them so irredeemable that I refuse to ever play through them again. And I play through Pokemon as my job. In this video, I'll explain my reasoning for that opinion, but I'm saving my most controversial reason for last. The first thing I must address is my definition of worst, because an understandable counter could be Red and Blue are objectively worse games. And that is generally true. BDSP have the quality of life improvements that have been added in the many years since Red and Blue came out. Better Pokemon storage, the physical special split.
The people who would argue that, though, are idiots. Because what you know what you're getting with those games. When I go back to Gen 2, I know I'm not getting a physical special split. But now, if they released a new Pokemon game that didn't have the physical special split, I would be like, why the hell do you not have the physical special split? If someone comes up to me and goes, well, you love Gen 2, they didn't have the split. Well, yeah, I like that as a product of its time. You release Pokemon Crystal right now, it looks like crap, it runs like crap, it doesn't have the quality of life, it doesn't have... But its nostalgia is why I like it. Make the improvements. Nothing is worse than when a game finds something good and then they take it out for the next feature. It makes no sense. Call of Duty is really bad at this too, where Call of Duty will find something that works and then won't add it to the next game right away. It's like, all right, every Call of Duty right now should come out with a Nuketown map right on launch. Why not? Because that's all half the player base even wants to play is Nuketown. Just give us Nuketown every time. So for BDSP, that's a huge example of what we want is just a good Pokedex, a good gaming experience, and all the add-on features from Platinum. Don't give us Diamond Pearl, because you already realized that game was bad enough that it needed an enhanced version.
Character customization, the removal of HMs, etc. On those fronts, Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl are better games. However, part of how I judge a Pokemon game is how it improves upon its predecessors. I cut Gen 1 a lot of slack because they were the first games, and they're almost 30 years old. BDSP should not get credit for quality of life improvements that were added in games that came long before them. So yes, not needing HMs is an improvement over the original Diamond and Pearl, but that's a low bar to clear, since Sun and Moon removed HMs 5 years prior. It's an improvement, but it's one that is, or at least should be, a given. In short, I'm judging the games based on the context of when they were released. So while by many measures BDSP are better than older Pokemon games, they are worse games overall. Because in many ways, they are worse than games that came before them.
And worst part of that, they're worse than what they are a remake of. It makes no sense to remake or remaster a game and make it worse than the original. It would be like SpongeBob Rehydrated would be a good example. It would be like that game coming out and being worse than Fight for Bikini Bottom in every way. There's no point then of even remastering it or remaking it. There's no point. So always, and this sounds so stupid, but I can't believe it even has to be said. If you're remaking a game, make it better than the original. Improve on the spots that need to be improved, but still keep the baseline game that people enjoy. Keep the story, keep the Pokemon, keep all those things that people enjoy, but enhance on the things that have improved over time. Whenever I want to play Sinnoh, I want to play Gen 4, I'm always going to go back to Platinum. That's because Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl, they failed at their job.
And that...
Which, perfect example, if I want to play Gen 1, I don't want to go back to Red and Blue. I go back to Fire Red and Leaf Green, or Let's Go.
Is not acceptable. BDSP's flaws fall into 3 main categories: highlighting issues with the original Diamond and Pearl, neglecting improvements from later games, especially Platinum, and creating new changes that either fall flat or cause outright harm. Let's start with the first section, highlight.
By the way, over the last 3 years, his videos have looked so much better. I have to give him a lot of credit, holy crap.
Issues with the original Sinnoh game. Being a new generation, they added a bunch of new Pokemon, many of which were evolutions of older Pokemon that sorely needed them, which I really appreciate. Gliscor is my personal favorite of those, and still one of my overall favorite Pokemon to this day. Remember that. It's gonna be important. And you should also remember to grab something from the MandJTVmerch.com.
I remember when he played through the game the first time, one of the first things he wanted to do, or I think it was maybe his Team Sky run that he always does. He wanted to use the Gliscor on his team, and he was excited to finally get to. And since it's not available, Gligar is, but since Gliscor isn't until after the league, I remember that being like I think he actually had a friend trade him a Gliscor so that he could play the game because he was so excited to play the game with that Pokemon.
But despite those additions, Diamond and Pearl did some other weird and bad things, primarily related to the regional Sinnoh decks. Most of those new evolutions, like Mamoswine or Magmortar, are not in the regional decks. They're locked to the post-game. What? Why? Why make all these cool new Pokemon, but not let you use any of them until you've basically finished the game? But even overlooking that massive issue,
because people also gotta realize, like, I'm a competitive player, so once I beat a game, I won't replay it now. I used to not be that way. A lot of people will play these games, beat the league, beat the champion, and immediately restart the game to have another experience. Like, a lot of people don't just keep their save file forever. A lot of people play the single-player experience only. So, having anything in the post-game, for a lot of individuals, a lot of players, they'll never touch that. That's beyond the game at that, to their point of view.
the DP Dex only has 151 Pokemon. 150 if you exclude Mythical Manaphy. This ties it with Kanto for the smallest regional Dex in all of Pokemon. Now, this could have been fine if it was balanced properly, but it isn't. This is a spreadsheet I made tracking the type distribution of the Diamond Pearl Dex, where dual-type Pokemon will appear twice. There are 73 total fully evolved Pokemon, and 17 of those are Water-type, meaning over 23% of the Dex possesses a type that you may not even want because you picked Piplup. Meanwhile, Electric's only fully evolved Pokemon are Luxray, Raichu, and Pachirisu. Ice only has Weavile and Abomasnow. Fire, infamously, only has Rapidash and Infernape. And what's even more insane about these underrepresented...
I didn't realize how restricted it actually was. Only 2 ice types, only 2 fire types. Yeah, if you want to make a well-rounded team, that would be real difficult. I'm trying to think of even, if I want it right now, there's times that I'll play Pokemon, I'll purposely try to do 12 different types between my 6 Pokemon. I'm trying to think if I would even be able to make a team like that, really. I guess you could, but
presented types
it would be
is that there
difficult.
are
You would have to
major
sit here and think
trainers
about
in
it.
the game that specialize in them. Candace, the Ice Gym leader, has to use a Metacham because they didn't want her to repeat more than one line. Volkner's team is only half electric since he wouldn't even use Pachirisu. And then there's Flint, an Elite Four member they decided should specialize in a type that only has 2 fully evolved Pokemon. Now, he's not the only Elite Four member to have this problem. Agatha and Lance are specialists in types that only had 1 evolutionary line.
Granted, Agatha was more of a poison type. Like, she says she's a ghost type, but all of her Pokemon were poison type. And Lance being a dragon type master kind of makes sense when dragon was such a rare type. It made sense to call Gyarados like a pseudo dragon in a way. Charizard, a pseudo dragon, Aerodactyl. Like, they still fit a theme. Flint didn't fit a theme
in their region. But again, original games, I cut more slack, and also they sort of remedied it by having them repeat Pokemon. But Flint does not repeat Rapidash or Infernape, resulting in him being the only supposed type specialist where less than half of his team actually fits his type. And he's using the same fire types you've already seen your rival use 1,000,000 times. Both the player and the NPCs are way too limited in their team options, and BDSP has those same issues. But they didn't have to. They could have fixed it because Platinum did.
Fixed it.
That leads in to the next section, ignoring previous improvements. Platinum version fixed Diamond and Pearl.
So just remember, this would also be like if they made a new remake to Pokemon Red and Blue, and they took none of the good features from Fire Red and Leaf Green. Like that's essentially what people are arguing here. And I think if they did remake Gen 1 again, I mean, they did kind of a Go, but Go was a completely different style of game. It would be weird to give you the Gen 1 experience without the Gen 3 experience. This is where it's weird, where Gen 4 didn't get a Gen 4 experience. It didn't get a good experience at all. It got the worst version of a Gen 4 game instead of the better version that was already made.
Bad regional dex problem, and it's the main reason why no one plays DP today, only Platinum. All of the cool new evolutions and the other members of their lines were added to the Sinnoh regional decks. alongside the lines of Scizor, Houndoom, Tropius, Altaria, Absol, and Rotom, which was originally locked to the post-game in Diamond and Pearl. This vastly expands the decks for both the player and the NPCs. Candace, Volkner, and Flint now have teams composed entirely of their specialty type without repeating any Pokemon. But what is insane to me is that BDSP ignored this. They have the same Sinnoh dex as the original Diamond and Pearl, which was a terrible regional dex. What? Why? Other remakes have kept the same regional decks as their original versions, specifically Fire Red Leaf Green, Heart Gold Soul Silver, and Let's Go. But they had no other versions of those regional dexes to reference. The Platinum Sinnoh dex was right there! It's a Gen 4 Sinnoh dex. Now, to be fair, BDSP are not as bad as Diamond and Pearl in this specific regard because of a new feature they added that I actually do like. The underground hideaways. In the Gen 4 Sinnoh games, no wild Pokemon could be obtained in the underground. But BDSP allowed you to find overworld Pokemon in habitat-specific hideaways added to the underground map. The pool of Pokemon expands the more badges you get, eventually allowing you to find a ton of Pokemon once you have the national dex. But the way they did this was not good enough. First off, while the player can use these underground Pokemon, the NPCs do not. So Candace, Volkner, and Flint are back to their awful, half-baked teams. Then, while many of the Platinum Dex lines can be obtained underground, several are still locked to the post-game, like in Diamond and Pearl. Eevee fans and Glaceon fans especially get really burned by this. Eevee is post-game only, like it was in Diamond and Pearl, not early game like in Platinum. Then even once you get one, you can't get Sylveon at all because BDSP are wholly incompatible with any Pokemon Gen 5 and later. This includes regional forms, which were never going to be obtainable in the game locally, but you can't even transfer them in. Even Let's Go lets you get those.
That's because Let's Go
God,
even does that.
Glaceon especially, like, oh my god. Sword and Shield changed its evolution method from leveling up near the Icy Rock to just using an Ice Stone. But BDSP ripped that away and kicked Eevee to the post-game, making yet another game where you cannot practically play through with a Glaceon.
And Eevee is such a good Pokemon to have in any Pokemon game, like, I would say midway through the game, because it can develop any team. Since it evolves into 6 different Pokemon or whatever, there are however many now, because it's 3 in Gen 1, 2 in Gen 2, 2 in Gen 4, and then 1 more, so 8. So you have 8 different typings that Eevee could fulfill so many different slots on a team. If you need a water type, you have one. If you need an electric type, you got one now. If you need a fairy type, you got one now. You dark, psychic, I mean, you could... Eevee is so good to make a team well-rounded that I think introducing it like at like Gym 5 or 6 even, so that it could be a team's like last member or second to last member is always a good idea. Having it in the postgame makes no sense because now it's just you limit yourself out of literally 8 different options. You could add in 1 Pokemon family line and give you 8 different options of final typing.
Glaceon was added to the game almost 20 years ago, and you couldn't practically play through with one until Sword and Shield. They hate Glaceon for some reason.
Haha! It is I, JarotDaCarot, and let me get right to it.
Here's an ad.
Is the spot of buyraycon.com/MandJTV or click the link below to get up to 30% off site-wide as part of the Black Friday sale.
I will definitely be grabbing some as gifts. Great sound quality at an extra great price. But I do need to circle back to what you said earlier. Are you implying that I look like I don't work out? I'll have you know, I am in excellent shape.
Oh, sorry, I cannot hear you right now, and I have to go. Ta-ta!
But going back to the underground Pokemon, Pinsir, Smoochum, and Teddiursa were randomly added. Sure, but what they did that is so enraging that my vision blurs every time I think about it.
He's gonna be mad
that
that
they made some
Gligar
Pokemon
can't
available,
evolve.
but don't let you evolve them. You can get Duskull, Rhyhorn, and crucially, Gligar down in the underground, but the Reaper Cloth, Protector, and Razorfang are locked to their Diamond and Pearl post-game locations. This is irredeemably unacceptable. Fire Red Leaf Green and Heart Gold Soul Silver also locked later gen evolutions to the post-game, such as Crobat is only post-game in Fire Red Leaf Green, and Honchcrow's only post-game in Heart Gold Soul Silver. To be clear, I've never been okay with this in any Pokemon game. They're remakes, not remasters. Like, you bring other improvements from the original versions, like the battle system changes and stuff like that. The new evolutions, those are improvements. Bring those over too.
And like I said, Heart Gold Soul Silver is the weird one, because Heart Gold Soul Silver, if the Pokemon evolved with a move, you could get its new evolution. You could get Yamega before, like, the Elite Four. You could get Mamoswine, before the Elite Four. But you couldn't get Honchcrow, you couldn't get Togekiss. Like, it was weird how Heart Gold and Soul Silver did it. It probably would be my only complaint about the game in general.
Let the Pokemon fully evolve during the playthrough. Omega Ruby Alpha Sapphire did this right, adding later gen evolutions to the regional decks. For example, Ruby Sapphire only had Roselia, but you can play through Oris with a Rose Raid. Let's Go reverted back to just the original 151, but they did it so completely, like Crobat does not exist in Let's Go at all. I do not like that. I want to be very clear. I wish Let's Go had Kingdra and Crobat and Steelix, etc. But I still think BDSP is worse for two reasons.
Let's Go is the closest thing to like a remake. Is it like or closer to a remaster than a remake, but with a completely different catch style? Let's Go is a really weird game. I like what they did because they want to give like new players the Gen 1 experience again. So I understand the let's not add any of the Pokemon from beyond Gen 1. Like this is Kanto. Kanto should be associated with these Pokemon. But I understand, like, yeah, it's a weird one. It's a weird one.
Is inconsistency. Why did they let you get Mamoswine and Gallade, but not Rhyperior? Why did they let you get Electivire and Magmortar, which do require the annoyance of getting their Evo items off wild Pokemon, but they don't let you get a Reaper Cloth or Razorfang on some other wild Pokemon? As for the second reason, the non-Oris remakes at least could be like, oh hey, we just did exactly what the original games did. Sure, I guess. I don't like it, but like, they would have to decide where the dragon scale would go in Kanto. I think it's stupid, but at least that argument can be made. But BDSP had Platinum as a reference. They had a Gen 4 Sinnoh game that had Rhyperior, Dusknoir, and Gliscor in it, and they could have just put the evolution items in the spots they were in Platinum. No decision necessary, just copy the Gen 4 game. That's what you were doing already! When I first played through Brilliant Diamond, I was so excited to use Gliscor, since I could finally have a flying type that did not need to be able to learn fly. And then after I caught Gligar, I found out the Razorfang was near the Battle Tower, its location from Diamond and Pearl. They put the Razorfang after the lead! In a defiant rage, I had a friend trade me a Razorfang, meaning I could only use Gliscor because I knew someone who had already finished the game. BDSP handled the DP versus Platinum deck situation in the worst way possible. Inconsistency, compartmentalization, getting people's hopes up only to dash them. This on its own is inexcusable for me, but I'm not even done. There are several more improvements that BDSP ignored. Sword and Shield made the move reminder free and in every Pokemon Center.
Yes.
BDSP put him back in Pastoria City. And while after 10 heart scale uses,
Sword and Shield is going to be looked back at as like the best quality of life Pokemon game ever made so far. And the issue is that unless you play competitive, you didn't really care. Like all the features that Sword and Shield provided that were good was only good for like the hardcore fans.
But it becomes free forever. This is still a downgrade from free everywhere all the time. TMs break again. Sword and Shield made it so some TMs never broke and some TRs needed purchasing, but this was a regression in my opinion. And BDSP made it worse. All TMs break, and you can only get more from randomized sellers in the underground that you have to track down and hope they're selling what you want. I wanted to teach Thunderwave to my Gallade to use for catching Pokemon, and I've never gotten the Thunderwave TM because my only options for getting it are tracking down a random dude in the underground or purchasing it with battle points at the Battle Tower? You want me to spend battle points? on a single use TM for Thunder Wave? Oh, and speaking of the Battle Tower, Platinum improved the Battle Tower into the Sinnoh Battle Frontier, which was ported over to Heart Gold Soul Silver as well. Apparently,
Yes.
Pokemon is extremely against ever doing a Battle Frontier again, because in BDSP, it's just the Battle Tower now.
I think they're done with Battle Frontiers mostly because I bet that took a lot of work to make competitive teams, make the whole thing as unglitchy as possible, put a lot of work into something that I bet you not 10% of players played. Like, I bet as a kid you walked into one and went, okay, I don't really understand this. It's either too hard or it was just battling. There was not much to it, like, whatever. I don't think people really, unless you're a hardcore fan, really cared about them. Looking back at it, I wish I cared about them, and I wish they would add them in now. But I get that I'm the type of person I'm going to put 100 hours into every Pokemon game. Most people are not like that. Most people want to play through the game once, they finish it, and then they're done.
Now, both Oris and BDSP failed to bring back their Battle Frontiers, and I think that stinks. I'm a smart adult now. Let me give them a shot. Then this next one is weird because technically they did bring in a good thing from previous games, but they did it so badly that I wish they had not brought it in at all. BDSP did following Pokemon the worst way in the entire series, despite having clear inspiration to take from previous games. You know what? Let's look at all of the previous game following Pokemon and their good and bad. Yellow had just the Pikachu follow you, and it functions similarly to Heart Gold Soul Silver, the gold standard, no pun intended, for following Pokemon. For every Pokemon in the game, Heart Gold Soul Silver puts a sprite behind your character that generally matches the size of the Pokemon, and it moves exactly at player speed. It looks great and feels great, and I genuinely have no criticisms. Let's Go nails it for a 3D world. The Pokemon are to scale, they show off unique movements like rolling Sandslash, and some of them let you ride them in interesting, unique, or even beneficial ways, like Arcanine moving faster. Sword and Shield does it quite badly. Not only is it limited to the DLC areas, but the Pokemon move stupidly.
Oh, I forgot that was limited to DLC. I forgot that the OG game didn't, like the original version of the game didn't do it. Huh, that's weird.
Some are simply too slow to ever keep up with you. Some are too slow when walking, too fast when sprinting, so they fall behind, sprint, fall behind, sprint. It's like you have a yo-yo behind you. Only specific fast enough Pokemon actually follow you well, but at least most Pokemon are to scale. BDSP took all the bad parts of Sword and Shield following, tried to put it in a Heart Gold Soul Silver style, and just ignored everything good about Let's Go. First, the Pokemon are not to scale, so bigger Pokemon look terrible. Look at Onyx in BDSP versus Let's Go.
Onyx is the best example.
It's night and day. Now, unlike other Switch games, BDSP has a different model for the overworld player versus the in-battle player. So it makes sense that they had to shrink things down. But in Heart Gold Soul Silver, where that's the case as well, they replaced the in-battle sprites with simplified chibi-esque sprites for following. BDSP did not do that. They just copied over the in-battle models, which looks incredibly stupid, especially for big Pokemon like Dialga, or for Pokemon who pose in battle differently than they would move. Look at Ekans following you in Let's Go.
That
nice,
looks so good.
Right? A slithering snake. Now look at it in BDSP. It epitomizes trashy, lazy.
Like, the second someone sees that in testing, they should be ashamed. Like, that should have been weeded out so quickly. That's what makes no sense about these games. Like, it's one thing to have it happen. It's another thing to have it... It's a AAA game. This is tested beforehand. Someone had to model that in and go, well, it's not slithering like a snake. And someone else go, yeah, it's fine, whatever. Like, it's lazy.
Easiness.
It's so lazy.
Additionally, they took all of Sword and Shield's movement problems and put them into BDSP. Some Pokemon are too slow, then have to sprint. Some are just too slow and can never keep up. It's annoying to have anything follow you, so I never did any of it. If they were gonna do following Pokemon right, they needed chibi Pokemon models, maybe similar to the ones from Pokemon Rumble, and those models should have followed the player at the speed of the player, no matter how fast the Pokemon actually is. I do not care about realism in Overworld Sinnoh. I'm playing as a character whose head is 3 times the size of their body and all the buildings face the same direction. Make the Pokemon cute and small and move at my speed. Now, of course, I'm aware making all of those chibi models would have been a lot of extra work, especially for like 400 or whatever Pokemon. So if on a time crunch, which, let's be real, they definitely were, they simply should not have had the feature at all. They only had it in Amity Square in the originals. So just make cute separate overworld models for the Pokemon that can go there and don't let following happen anywhere else. Instead, they tossed this in seemingly as an afterthought and marketed it as a fancy new feature that's just a worse version of something that already existed in previous games. And now for the final category of problems, new things that suck. I know I said something else earlier, but that's basically what it is. You could summarize this as, oh, you kept the DP Sinnoh Dex to be faithful? Then why'd you do this? First is how the game looks. This is quite subjective, but I don't personally like it, although it may not be for the reasons that you think. The chibi art style was heavily criticized, but that doesn't actually really bother me that much. I think they could have gone for something more like an Oris, but I understand preserving the shrunken person style for this type of world map. What I really don't like is how the battles and the characters look. Many Pokemon are not to scale, which they were in Let's Go. None of the characters got cool redesigns like they did in Oris. And also, I think they just look bad. Every time I go to a Sinnoh Gym Leader's Bulbapedia page, I get jump scared by their BDSP art. The renders look emotionless and like they're made of weird clay. No other 3D Pokemon game is making me feel like this. I don't know why. I'm not an artist or a game developer, so I don't know if it's the shading or the models or the expressions, but like, I just don't like how any of the people look. All of their eyes look dead. Another bad change they made was just...
Okay, just to touch on that, I kind of disagree. I think the in-battle stuff actually looks pretty good in the game. The overworld, other than the walking Pokemon, I don't mind the art style, but it's almost... I have the same issue with movies. I can put myself in to these environments super easily, so it's hard for me to be the one to judge it. Like, if the game looks half decent, it looks half decent. Like I said, I'm a Gen 2 fan. I mean, give me back the pixel art, and I'm perfectly content. So I can't criticize that too much. I think the game looks fine. I just wish the game had consistent art style all the way through, but...
How you move around the world. In almost every game before Sun and Moon, the character is locked to a grid, the original Sinnoh games included. This is perfectly fine, because the worlds around the character are designed with sets of tiles. But then the games advanced, and in Alola and Galar, the player has more freedom of movement. The developers of BDSP carried that freedom of movement over to Sinnoh. The character is not locked to a grid, so if you inch over a little at a time, your character will only move an inch at a time, not 1 square over per press of the button. This was a huge mistake. Moving around with the joystick is fine if it's a wide open area, but in crowded places with thin walkways like Mount Coronet, I can't get around a single corner without getting caught on it. But then moving around with the directional buttons instead still doesn't solve your issue completely. Not only are you still not confined to the grid, but you now have to hold the run button the whole time, which you don't while using the joystick. Additionally, the Joy-Con has 4 distinct buttons, as opposed to a 1-button D-pad where you can change directional inputs just by tilting your finger. This causes problems because when I want to change directions, my thumb leaves a button, then hits another, causing a momentary stoppage in input.
It's a small thing, but
my character pauses for a moment before turning. Maybe it's better on a Pro Controller, but I've had way too many Pro Controller D-pad problems to tolerate that. And what's frustrating about this is that there's 2 ways they could have done it better that earlier games did. The first is in Oris. Moving with the circle pad does not lock the character to a grid, but if you want to swap to the D-pad, it instantly puts you back on the grid. Plus, the 3DS has a traditional D-pad. So changing directions is smooth and instant. Let's Go never has the character on a grid, but they redesigned the world to account for that. For example, Kanto's Route 13 is the one with that random labyrinth of fences. Who built these? And why? Did their herd of cows turn into minotaurs? But anyways, in the 2D games, the paths between fences are only 1 tile wide. But then in Let's Go, they're wide enough for the player to run in a circle between them. If there's no grid, you need wider spaces, and Let's Go nailed that. BDSP should have allowed us to get on a grid for tight spaces, or redesigned the world so that there weren't as tight of spaces. And they did neither, so moving around the world sucks.
Again, it's one of those things right in the testing feature, you should know this. Like, the game really feels untested more than anything else, because how do you not figure that out in the testing period of like, oh, this movement is sloppy, especially on the Joy-Cons, especially on the freaking Switch Joy-Cons. Like,
and the final thing they changed that I'll be discussing, which I take huge issue with, is also the thing I expect to get the most pushback on. Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl have an absolutely terrible difficulty problem.
Difficulty curve.
As you progress through the game, you have a universal...
Like, I get what he's saying. The issue is, it's the best feature of the game and the worst feature of the game at the same time. It's the best feature because it's the only thing about the game I want to go back and do is face the Elite Four. It's bad because I don't want to play through any of the rest of the game because I know it's going to be a cakewalk until I get to the Elite Four. It's a difficulty curve problem. It's not a difficulty all the way through the game problem.
Experience share, something not present in the Gen 4 games. This is a problem because they did not adjust the major trainer battle levels to compensate for this. By the time I fought Volkner, my entire team was level 52 or 53, while his highest was 49. Now, they did try to compensate for this, but it didn't really work. As time goes on, the gym leaders start to use better items. Byron uses a soft sand and citrus berry, but then Candace's Snover has an icy rock to extend the hail, and Sneasel has a chopal berry. Volkner's Raichu has a shuka berry. Additionally, later gym leader Pokemon start to have EVs, which trainer Pokemon did not have at all in the originals. However, despite that, I beat basically all the gym battles handily, even playing on set style. For the most part, the game was really easy. And that's not just because I'm an adult now. I have lost to Platinum Candace as an adult.
It happens.
Now, most of my team was weak to ice, and she has a Frostlass with Snow Cloak and Double Team, which is a really nasty set, I'll be real. But BDSP didn't have that. But essentially, the result of the universal experience share was like, okay, the game was really easy, but now I should not have to grind before I fight the Elite Four. And the slog of grinding before that, it's always been my least favorite part of Pokemon. So I entered my first fight with the League with my team at or almost at level 60, and Cynthia's highest level is 66. It felt like a nice middle ground level because I wanted to do it on set battle style and without using any potions. The game had been so easy up to that point, I'm like, yeah, I'm gonna give myself this challenge. And then I learned they made the League ridiculous. All the Elite Four have intelligent EV spreads. They're not maxed out, but having smart EV spreads when the original games had no EVs at all is crazy. They also have excellent natures, mostly jolly and adamant for physical attackers or timid and modest for special attackers. Their IVs are almost all perfect, including 3 of Lucian's Pokemon having 0 speed IVs, because he uses
Trick Room.
0 speed IVs for Trick Room. That is a competitive Pokemon
style.
player strategy. And that's not the only one they use. Flame Orb Guts Heracross, Rest Chestoberry Hippowdon, Life Orb on Sheer Force Steelix, and Magic Guard Alakazam. Oh, and did you notice anything about some of the Pokemon I just mentioned? If you didn't, well, some of them have their hidden abilities. And then you get to Cynthia. And it gets truly disgusting. All of her Pokemon have perfect IVs in all but one stat. And that stat is usually the offensive stat they're not using. They have maxed out EV spreads. Their strategies are ridiculous. Leftovers Gastrodon, Flame Orb Marvel Scale Milotic. Her Garchomp, which was already infamously hard in the old games, now has Rough Skin, holds a Yachi Berry, and knows Swords Dance. She has a fully competitive team that probably outlevels your random EV, random nature Pokemon.
Yep.
And she's using full restores. I played on set, but despite my extensive Pokemon experience, I still lost to her on my first try. I even came back having EV trained my Weavile and still did not outspeed the Garchomp. And then I only won because of affection, a stupid crapshoot mechanic that allowed me to live or dodge attacks I normally would not. Now I know what some of you are thinking. This is really cool. I have thought Pokemon was too easy for far too long, so it's nice to have a serious challenge. I enjoy the process.
Yeah, it's super weird that the game itself gives you like such a bad experience up until the Elite Four, and then for like the higher level players, it gave us such a fun experience. But that fun experience would have been the turnoff for the casual players. Like you could appeal to both. Like the casual players are gonna hate the Elite Four, and the hardcore players are gonna hate the entire game leading up to the Elite Four. Like you literally pissed everyone off.
Of losing over and over and over again until I eventually overcome that obstacle. I mean, of course some of you would think that. That's why difficult games are played. Now, if you think that way, that's just a personal preference difference between the two of us that we got to establish. I personally avoid difficult games like the plague because when playing games, I tend to prefer my kicking ass to getting my ass kicked ratio to be high. But despite that preference, I don't have a problem with Pokemon games including really difficult challenges. In this video, I've lamented the fact that we haven't had a Battle Frontier in 15 years. My problem with the BDSP League, and the reason I think it's bad, is because of when it is. They're locking all the post-game content behind a challenge that the game has not properly prepared you for, since no battles before this have come close to being this tough. You breeze through most of the game with random EV, random IV, random nature Pokemon, and then you're expected to beat fully competitive Pokemon with your playthrough team? Pokemon competitive battling has always kind of been in defiance of the friendship/partner aspect of Pokemon, since to win, you generally need properly bred super soldiers trained perfectly for battle. But if the random ones that you formed a bond with and just took on your journey without any specific training methods are what the game wants you to play with, then why does the Pokemon League have the super soldiers that'll spit on your Pokemon's graves? And even if you decide you want to make your own super soldiers, realistically, you can't. Some of the League Pokemon have hidden abilities.
Everything is in the post game.
Wild hidden ability Pokemon until you have the Pokeradar, which needs the National Dex, which is technically possible to get before you beat the League, but it's an insane time sink, no one's gonna do it. Many of the competitive items they use are only found in the Battle Park by spending BP. The power items for efficient EV training are also locked behind the National Dex. You can't even realistically breed for good IVs because the Destiny Knot is either found on Route 224, which requires you to beat the League, or you have to hope for a 1% chance to get it from pickup. So much of Pokemon's difficult.
And remember, that also comes from you need to know this much about Pokemon already. The casual fan does not know any of this. The casual fan would not know what the Destiny Knot does. The casual fan doesn't even know what IVs are. So it's super hard to expect someone who, like I said, you almost have to appeal to the hardcore fans or the casual fans, and they appeal to both in different aspects at the worst times. The hardcore fan might have gave up on the game by the time that they got to the hard part, and the casual fan isn't ever going to beat the game because of the hard part.
Difficulty is affected by preparation and team building. But if you can't prepare in the same way that the League does, that is unfair. And that means your only methods of preparation are realistically hoping you get lucky with affection or frickin' grinding. I don't mind the existence of a competitive Pokemon League if it's the rematch. That allows you to either build up a competitive team with all of the resources you now have access to, or train up against post-game level Pokemon with your playthrough team. But
See, I'm okay with the original, like, Elite Four being difficult, but I agree with him. You need to have access to make your team perfect beforehand, too. Because that battle against Cynthia, the one thing it does so perfectly is, when you win, you feel like you're the champion. You feel like you've earned something. In so many of the newer Pokemon games especially, you beat the champion, it's like, yeah, I was supposed to. I was overpowered the whole game. No one has even took out more than one or two of my Pokemon. You're basically going to the tournament with almost like the Tobias in the Gen 4 like anime. Like you're going in like, yeah, no, I have 2 legendary Pokemon. I should win. Like the beating Cynthia should feel like a, oh, I did it type experience. Now, I do agree with him. Halfway through the game, make it where you got access to the mints. Halfway through the game, make it where you can adjust your IVs a little bit or your EVs a little bit. Because one thing I disagree with him, I don't think you need a competitive level team to beat Cynthia in this game. I think you need a well-rounded team. You can't go in there with 6 B-doofs like you probably could in the older games. But you can go in there with something. You can go in there with a good diverse team and be able to switch around in the right way. You will eventually beat it.
So defeating this unfair league is a requirement.
I'm pretty sure my friend Bree, I think she beat it by using a Trick Room team. I think she had her Miss Magius, I don't know how to pronounce that. I think she taught it like Trick Room and like Ice Beam. And that was her counter for the Garchomp, is I'm going to have Trick Room up before Garchomp comes out, and then I have a counter for the Garchomp. Like, essentially, my whole team is slower than hers. I'll take advantage of that with Trick Room. Which was clever. Like, she doesn't play Pokemon hardcore. So when she, like, was bouncing ideas off me of, like, how do I beat this? How do I beat this? One of her complaints was everything outspeeds me. And I said, do you have anything that can use Trick Room? She had to learn that aspect of the game. And then when she beat it, she, like, basically messaged me immediately. Like, I beat it. It was a good experience for her. But she never gave up on it. So many other people in her position would not sit there and research it for that long. They would have just gave up at one point or another.
To unlock more content is just kind of cruel and extremely hostile to beginners. This is very specific to me, but I think back to the emotional kid that I was when I played Diamond and Pearl for the first time in middle school, the worst years of my life. And if kid me had to fight this version of Cynthia, he would have cried with rage and probably would have beaten it eventually with excessive potion usage or many, many hours spent grinding, but I feel like it would have left a really sour taste in my mouth from the experience, and very well may not have gone back to play the games again for a very long time. I get that people getting frustrated and raging at video games can be funny and entertaining, but I personally don't like feeling that way, and I don't want a kid to have to feel that way to beat a Pokemon game. And yes, I understand overcoming.
Now, arguably, one thing I do like now is how many of these kids playing Pokemon now are playing Pokemon and their parents used to play Pokemon. I mean, remember, Pokemon Red and Blue came out like 30 years ago. So we're to the point now where, like, if I had a kid right now, my kid would be playing the, like, probably 2 generations from now. They might have to come up to me and go, like, why am I losing this battle? Now you're going to have some parents who are also former Pokemon trainers and whatnot. Like, they're going to be able to sit there and help their kid with it. We're going to hit a point there where you're going to have generations of Pokemon players. Like, I've always thought that'd be kind of cool of when are we going to get the age of Wolf Glick having, like, a son that's also in the Pokemon tournaments? Where you're going to have his son in the junior division. Like, that would be an awesome experience. Like, but I don't know if we're there yet. I don't know if you have that 14-year-old kid, the 12-year-old kid, with the 25, like, our 30-year-old parent who plays Pokemon. Like, I don't think you have that yet. Because I do think BDSP is almost built that way, where the kid's supposed to go to the older brother, or the kid's supposed to go to the parent. I can't beat this. And you're supposed to, oh, that's because you can't just have legendaries. Your legendaries have to be useful. Like, you're supposed to have those conversations with them.
Can really help people grow, but I don't know about you. As a kid, I didn't want challenge in my Pokemon games. I got enough challenges just living my life. In Pokemon, I wanted to escape to a world in which I could explore and collect and feel cool for kicking ass in battle. And so I feel bad for the kids like me who had to fight this version of Sinnoh's Pokemon League, because it's this brutal, awful thing that keeps you from exploring and collecting more. But even if you disagree with me on the difficulty piece of it, I believe that Brilliant Diamond Shining Pearl's other flaws are still enough to make them the worst mainline Pokemon games ever made. If we get future traditional type remakes like this of other regions like Unova, I desperately hope that they learn from the mistakes of these disastrous remakes. Thanks so much for watching, and if you enjoyed this video, check out my...
They have to learn, because the issue that they have right now is BDSP literally did everything wrong. Like, they would bring in stuff that the audience wanted from previous games and then do them 100% wrong, almost universally. You want Pokemon to follow you? Cool. Here's the worst version of it. You want difficulty... You want the Pokemon game to be difficult? Cool. We'll make it difficult, but only the last 5 battles and nothing leading up to it will ever indicate that it's difficult. Do you want new features? The Underground will add new Pokemon, but not all of them. Like we're gonna go in between Diamond and Pearl, but not quite to Platinum. It's like, what are we doing here? Like, it makes no sense to me. But I think Pokemon will learn its lesson from this. The Legends games arguably was another Sinnoh remake, in a way. And Legends Arceus is, in my opinion, the best Pokemon game ever made, as of right now. Let's get him a better image. There you go. But yeah, that's just how it is. And the Let's Go games, in my opinion, were a good version of Red and Blue. Here's a completely new game, a different mechanic, but you get the same, like, you're going through the same generation. And that game, you saw a lot of people still stream it for shiny hunting. Like, the game is pretty popular still, believe it or not. Even though hardcore fans probably don't like it as much, it's good for the casual fans. Casual fans didn't like this game because of the difficulty curve. Hardcore fans didn't like it because it was too easy and then too hard and didn't provide any of the features that they wanted. So I wanted to go through these videos because I do plan on making a tier list eventually. I want to be able to have the arguments to at least be able to quickly say, like, this is why I don't like the game, and not just go, well, they're bad because they're bad. This is a very good... His 2 videos on them explain exactly how I felt too. And like I said, I disagree with him a little bit on the difficulty curve conversation, but M&J TV understands this perfectly. I mean, he's one of the biggest Pokemon YouTubers for a reason. So, I'm going to leave his information in the description below. Go follow him if you haven't yet. If you're one of my friends watching the video and you're like, I don't know who that guy is, he's a great YouTuber. Go follow him for other Pokemon content. If you do like Pokemon content, follow me. Pokemon is probably going to be my main game on this channel, with Call of Duty and like Valorant, one-off games, horror games kind of being secondary. But we'll see. We'll see what catches on in the algorithm. But remember, only you can help me become viral. Thank you guys for watching. Please like, share, and subscribe. I am JarotDaCarot, and peace out, guys.